So I'm so excited to make this for you today because brunch is one of my favorite meals. And I could probably have brunch for dinner, brunch for lunch, brunch for breakfast, but it is so delicious. And I have to tell you something about my cooking. You know, a lot of times when we don't do something maybe as well as we hope, we figure out a hack or a way around it. And that's what frittata was for me. I never quite mastered making the perfect omelet, and it always ended up kind of a little bit drippy and maybe not quite as done as it was supposed to be. So I started making frittatas. And what you may not realize is that a frittata is actually something that's made in a number of different cultures. Yes, is the name Italian? It absolutely is. But we know that it has history in Persian, in Iranian, in Spanish culture. A Spanish omelet is really no different than the Italian frittata. It basically, frittata means anything that's a fried egg falls in that category. So what we're going to do today is make what I think is just a perfect brunch. You can add any kinds of ingredients that you'd have left over in the refrigerator. But in the case of today, we're going to make this beautiful Kvaroy Arctic frittata with artichokes, goat cheese, and even a little bit of basil. Now, the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to get over to the stove and make ones because they come together so quickly. I want it to be in real time. And while we're waiting for it to cook in the broiler, then what we'll do is I'll give you some tips about the ingredients and everything else. Now, because this starts off by sauteing the vegetables a little bit in the pan, the first thing I wanted you to see was what vegetables I have. So I'm going to have a little bit of onion and some garlic. And then I take my leek, and leeks actually, are grown in a fair amount of water and dirt. So the big problem with them is that every layer can have dirt inside. So the little tip here is that we're going to take this leek and we're going to cut it down the middle, and we're going to look at all of these layers and we're going to rinse them in water. So I have the water waiting, but you could also do this in the sink if you wanted. And if you ended up slicing it, part of the problem is if you slice it, what you'll end up with sometimes as you're sauteing is you'll see dirt within the layers. But now if we've made sure to rinse it well, then we can just slice it and you'll see that we don't have any dirt in between those layers. So that's the first thing. Now this can be used, all those extra leaves can be used. Just put them in the refrigerator and then you can chop them up, put them into salads, or sometimes I'll even cut it. Oh, there's that, see that dirt in there? See? So you want to make sure that all of that's rinsed out before you use it. So I would even take this and maybe dry it and put it in soups if you wanted to. Now we also have a little bit of garlic that we're going to just lightly chop, and some onion. And remember, that's already sauteed when I move over to the stove top. Now the next thing is I've got some eggs, and this recipe actually calls for 2 frittatas. So you're taking 6 eggs and 6 eggs for each pan. Since I'm just going to start with one, I'm just starting with the 6 eggs in a bowl. Normally you could mix the 2 together and then just make 2 at once. Now the next thing that I'm going to do after I've just mixed this a little bit is I have some ingredients to put in it. A little bit of half and half, which actually will make this fluffier. In this case, it's about 1/4 of a cup. I also am going to add some Parmesan cheese to this, and I like using the ribbons, which you can make with your vegetable peeler if you want to. Just gives it a little bit of texture. And some fresh basil. Now we also have just a little ground of black pepper. You always want to grind this fresh. And the reason why is because it has this amazing ability to bring out sweetness in your dish. Otherwise, it really just kind of gives it sort of a dusty flavor. And then I'm also going to use a little bit of kosher salt. You can always add a little extra once the frittata is finished. And finally, a little dash of Tabasco. The Tabasco is just enough just to bring out, again, the flavors in all of these ingredients. And then I'm just going to gently combine this. We don't need to overbeat the eggs. We're not trying to whip a lot of air into them. Just want to get them combined. Now, if you haven't seen my friend Eric Wolfinger's videos with the Tabasco company and all of the beautiful story behind it, this is a family that has been making this on the Makalani Island for many, many years. And he did this beautiful video of it. You should check it out. So now let's move over to the stove. Now I'm gonna go ahead and get my vegetables heated up again. And you can see that I have very, very gently cooked this leek and onion and garlic. There's almost no color to it. It actually just has softened. You might not know is that the slower you cook this, the sweeter it will get. If you cook an onion and leek really quickly and it browns fast, then that's going to actually make it more bitter. So it may seem like it's a good thing to keep a lot of heat on this, but it's actually not. And obviously there's some butter in this pan. What I've done is I've used unsalted butter and I've brought it to just a bubble. So I've gotten the pan hot enough before I put these in to let the butter bubble without burning. The trick there is that when you bring it up to temperature and you've allowed that butter to bubble and almost foam, it won't stick. Generally, when something sticks in a pan, it's because the pan wasn't hot enough. So whenever you're making an omelet or a fried egg, well, I wouldn't be making an omelet, as you know. I'm making a frittata. But if you were, you let that butter come up to a bubble and foam, and then you can add the ingredients. It'll keep everything from sticking. And the trick here, and we hope it works out this time with our frittata as I show it to you, is that it doesn't stick to the pan and I'm able to get it right up and then slide it into a plate. So you can see that it's starting to get a little bit warm, but without browning. And that's the key, is we just want all of that sweetness to start to come out. Now, as I'm doing that, I also have some other ingredients that I'm going to add. It's artichoke season, so if you wanted, you could actually make artichokes for your family and then use the heart and the interior leaves for this frittata if you wanted. I feel like the easiest thing, honestly, is to have canned artichokes in your pantry. Each one of these recipes, each one of these frittatas is going to take 1 can of artichoke hearts. You can see I like the ones that are quartered with the leaves, and we want to saute these just slightly at the end with our leeks. It's just kind of allowing it to get a little bit of color. I'm going to turn the heat down so that I don't over brown those leeks. But just allows it to get a little bit dried out, because part of the thing about a frittata is to think about the ingredients, because if there's a lot of water in those ingredients, then it's going to water down the eggs. We don't need anything additional in those eggs, for sure. Now, one of the things I love about these flavors, along with that basil, is it really is a beautiful early summer dish. What I'm going to do with this now is I'm going to add in my egg mixture. And I'm going to lower the heat. We don't want to get any of the browning on the eggs either. But you can see that what I'm doing is just slowly stirring this so that it starts to thicken. And it really is something that you want to pay attention to, because as you stir it, you're starting to get the eggs just cooked. And then we can add our other ingredients. So you can see just along the edges here how it's starting to cook together. We need it to be a little bit thickened and starting to cook prior to adding it to the oven, because the broiler's on, and what we're going to do once this starts to thicken is we're actually going to broil it in the oven. So it'll get nice and puffy and almost like a little cake. But you can see how I'm pulling all of these ingredients into the center and just starting to thicken this. So now it's getting nice and thick. You can start to see thickening on the edges. I'm going to try to move this other side over so that we can get it thickened as well. And what I do at this point is just kind of pull it towards the center so that I'm sure to get the entire thing evenly cooked, while also making sure it's going to slide out of that pan, which again, we're going to hope that it'll come out of the pan for you here today. Now, while this is cooking, I want to show you the other ingredients that I'm actually going to add to it. We just want this to continue to cook on the other side. Now, I am obsessed with all of these marinated goat cheese. They're delicious. This is one that actually, Chibo is actually located here in Marin County, and it has a little salt and just a beautiful olive oil over it. Of course, you can use just a regular French chèvre, which is just a traditional goat cheese. And I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to take chunks of it and put it along the top of our thickened frittata. And then the next thing is, I'm going to take our beautiful Kvaroy Arctic salmon, which I've already cooked, which makes this such a perfect leftover. So I just take the skin off, and I'm going to flake some of the pieces on the top of this frittata. It's going to give it a chance to get really nice and crispy. Of course, you could mix it into the egg if you wanted, but I love how it looks once it starts to cook in the broiler. It'll get really beautiful, and the browning of it is really nice. Kvaroy Arctic, of course, is a sustainably raised salmon. We actually raise it in the Arctic Circle. It's a third generation family farmer, and I am so proud of the work that they are doing. So this was a 10-ounce piece. And I guess we have a question right now, so please chime in, ask me the question, Matt.
Yeah, Jen, so we have a question coming in on Facebook. Someone is, Kay is actually wondering, is that a nonstick cast iron pan?
It is. I love the Le Creuset pans. This is a cast iron. It's a non-stick coated cast iron skillet, and it really holds the heat beautifully. So I end up using it for things like searing, whether it's burgers, or using it to be able to really do a hot sear on the top of that salmon. That's how I got the top of the salmon so beautifully browned, was that I actually seared it. This is a leftover, but it was seared really hot in the top of that. And that's also how I get that great color on the skin. It's absolutely the perfect one. And I know they're a little expensive. I'm going to check this frittata really quickly. We don't want to get it overdone. I know that they're expensive, but they actually are worth it. And you don't have to buy very many pieces. So it could be that you just buy the skillet and you buy the other piece. I love the cast iron pots, so that I can do really slow braising and cooking. And that also is wonderful. So I just have two pieces of Le Creuset. One is the nonstick heavy skillet, and then the other is the big enamel coated cast iron pot. Now I want to show all of you what's happening here. I'm not 100% sure it's done yet, but what I start to look for is that I want it to puff up, and I want it to start to get fully cooked inside. And you can see how I'm starting to get a little bit of browning on that goat cheese. I'm going to put it back in the oven because it's not quite done. It'll set up and it'll get really puffy. And what I love about this is that it's something that you can be making, say, the sauteed vegetables first, and then you can have all of the ingredients ready. And then as you're ready to serve it, if it's just for two or maybe it's for the family, you don't have to worry because you can just put it together and put it out. I have another question. Tell me.
Yes, Pamela on Facebook is wondering what the oven temperature was.
So this is on broil. So we have put it in the broiler at high heat, and I have a feeling that we're probably ready. Here we go. Now that to me is looking gorgeous, right? Puffy, beautiful. We've got a little bit of browning. And what I'm going to do, so you can see, Pam, I've got the broil as close as I can with the high heat. I've already done some of the cooking, of course, on the stove top. And then I can take this and I'm going to bring it over and we can have a little chat here about this. Now, if it's me, I probably want to serve it right in the cast iron skillet. But a few things that, because this comes together so quickly, we want to talk about before we serve it. Now, the first thing is you can serve these at room temperature or even cold. I mean, anybody who's gone to a tapas bar, for example, knows that you get them after they've already been made. Perfectly fine. So it's something that if you decided that you wanted to put it out on your brunch buffet, or you wanted to make it ahead of time and then cut it into wedges or cut it into squares, it's really not a problem. You can do it. But there is something really wonderful about this, as it's, you know, got all of its sort of wonder and crispiness all together. So what I do is I just loosen this along the sides of the pan. And you can see how just by starting to loosen it, it begins to give way. And what I have realized is I'm going to grab an offset spatula. I have one with me. Here we go. We'll do this. I'm going to grab a little offset just to make sure that it's not sticking in the center. And then I've got a plate here. I'm just going to make a little bit of room. This one will be ready for the next one that I make. Put it here. Jody, you just zoom in on that. I'm going to grab my spatula real quick. I don't want it to fall apart on all of you. And here we go. I'm gonna take it. You know what I'm gonna leave it. It's a little too warm, everybody, to take it out of there right now. Probably better off left just to be able to set than it is while it's still so hot. And it is just a little bit too hot to pull it out. But what's great about this, and as I said and mentioned before, I mean, you can definitely serve it here in the skillet, or as it puffs up and it just starts to cool, you can slide it right out. And I think it's going to be a little bit too hot to do it. But the great thing about these, all of them, is that they can have different ingredients. You can add different things to it. So let's say you have that leftover salmon, you've got a little bit of sauteed onion, maybe you've got a little bit of vegetables that you've done on the grill. The great thing about a frittata is that you can use a lot of different ingredients to go with it. And then, of course, if you want, you can take just a little bit of extra cheese. You could do a little bit of extra herbs over the top, and you'd actually be able to serve it hot there in the skillet as well, just getting a nice little wedge off of that. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about as we were getting these finished is about the ingredients that you use, because the trick is, as you're making this, you want to have all of the ingredients at room temperature. So you can see how I've got my eggs out, I've got my half and half out, I've got everything ready to go before it goes into the pan. So all of those pieces, remember making sure that every single thing is dried off, that you're not adding any extra additional moisture to the pan itself. And then make sure that your butter is really nice and hot so that you can get all of this beautiful crispiness and all of the ingredients out of it without it sticking. And then at that point, when you're ready to serve it, you can take it, you can use it room temperature, you can make it if you wanted to ahead and serve it cold. And you can also do it if you wanted in a large 9 by 13 inch pan and be able to serve it that way. But you can see some other amazing things that I put together. I wouldn't ever serve a brunch without my grandmother's crumb cake, coffee cake. You're going to be able to see that. We have that recipe on the blog. We have a beautiful berry salad, and we also have a mimosa that is delicious and ready for everyone. So all of these different ingredients coming together using our beautiful Kvaroy Arctic salmon, a sustainably raised salmon, which obviously is something that we really care about as we look at the health of our oceans for World Oceans Week. And also we think about how we're going to maintain a food system with a growing population. So with all of these things put together, Jeanette, tell me, do we have any other questions before we wrap up? Our frittata went pretty quickly today.
I know I don't have any additional questions, but I do see a very nice looking Donabe smoker back there, and we have a giveaway.
Yes. Well, I should be talking about that, in fact, because our dear friend, Eric Wolfinger, is going to be doing a Denabe smoker giveaway in advance of his Denabe cooking class that he's going to do on Thursday. Now, if you don't know Denabe, this is something that is really cool. I'll show it to you. When you open up the Denabe smoker, you'll see that it has all of these different layers in it. And it's really simple to use, where you just put a little bit of foil in the bottom of this. And what you put in there then is some wood chips. You get it hot, and then you layer with all of these different screens, different ingredients. And then you put the top on, and you just let it cook on the top of your stove. What's amazing about this is that about 10, 15 minutes into this, you put a little bit of water around the rim, and then it cooks perfectly the foods that you have in it in about 20 minutes. So we're really excited to give one away. We've got some signed copies of cookbooks from Eric that is going to be amazing. He's got a book that he worked with Kyle Connaughton, who's a Michelin star chef, and a number of others. So we're going to give that book away and one of the Denabe smokers this week as we get ready in celebration of our Father's Day. So we've got Oceans Week this week, and then we've got Father's Day next week with, believe it or not, just one James Beard Award winning chef, Eric Wolfinger. So you'll definitely have to tune in on Thursday. And I think that's
thank you,
it.
Jennifer. Yeah,
Yes.
Everything looks so delicious. Everyone is commenting that they're drooling and ready to dig in and make this for sure. Thank you so much for showing us how to do this. It's so easy.
It's so easy. We'll have a little of the frittata. We'll have, of course, a little wedge of coffee cake and some berries, and it's really the perfect fast brunch. So thank you all for tuning in. And if you have other questions or you want to find the recipe, please look at it at kvaroyarctic.com on the blog.